chosen ones, I have an urgent and powerful message to share today. This message is not for everyone. If you are not walking the divine path, if your heart is not aligned with God, this may not resonate with you. But if you are truly chosen, if you have felt different all your life, if your spirit has been calling you deeper into God's purpose, then listen carefully. This message reached you at the exact moment your soul needed it. Not early, not late, perfectly on time. Today, God wants you to understand why your soulmate could not find you until this very season, why love kept delaying, why connections came close but never stayed, why your heart had to wait longer than others. This delay was not punishment. It was protection. It was preparation. And it was divine. If you stay with me until the end, what I am about to reveal will calm your mind, heal your heart, and shift how you see love forever. You will finally stop questioning yourself and start trusting God's timing with peace. Before we continue, chosen ones, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon so you don't miss these divine messages, and share this video with other chosen ones who need this healing. And comment 777 in the comments to declare that you are aligned with God's timing and divine plan.
You were set apart before love was assigned. Chosen ones, before love ever entered the picture, God marked you. Long before you even understood what companionship meant, your soul was already set apart. This is something many people will never understand about you. You were not created to follow ordinary timelines. You were not designed to blend in, to rush, or to attach yourself casually. God separated you early because your spirit carries weight. From a young age, you felt different. You questioned deeper things. You felt emotions more intensely. You noticed pain others ignored. And even when you desired love, something always felt off when it came close. That wasn't you being difficult. That was your spirit refusing to settle. God does not place sacred vessels in ordinary hands. Many chosen ones experience isolation not because they are unwanted, but because they are protected. God often removes you from relationships before they can distract you from your assignment. Love, when introduced too early, can become a chain instead of a blessing, and God will never allow His chosen to be bound by something that slows their spiritual growth. You see, before God assigns love, He assigns purpose. And your purpose required solitude, reflection, and refinement. You had to learn who you were without leaning on someone else. You had to hear God's voice clearly, without interference, without emotional noise, without dependency. That is why relationships felt heavy. That is why you felt drained instead of fulfilled. They were not aligned with who you were becoming. This is where many chosen ones misunderstand themselves. They assume something is wrong with them. They wonder why love comes easily to others but not to them. But what they don't see is that most people are allowed to experiment. You were not. God does not allow His chosen to waste time in emotional confusion. He removes what is not aligned swiftly, sometimes painfully, but always purposefully. Your heart had to be preserved. Your sensitivity had to be guarded. You feel deeply. And if God had allowed you to bond too early with the wrong soul, it would have taken years to recover. Some people can walk away from heartbreak and move on quickly. You are not built that way. When you love fully. When you connect, you merge. And God knew that. That is why He stepped in. That is why He blocked access. That is why things ended suddenly, without closure, without explanation. God does not always explain Himself in the moment, but He always reveals His wisdom in time. And today, you are mature enough to understand it. You were not rejected. You were reserved. There is a difference between being alone and being set apart. Loneliness feels empty. Being set apart feels quiet, but purposeful. In those silent seasons, God was shaping your discernment. He was teaching you to recognize energy, intention, and spirit. He was sharpening your intuition so that when your soulmate finally appears, you won't be confused, desperate, or blinded by illusion. Many people meet love before they meet themselves. That leads to attachment, fear, and control. God did not want that for you. He wanted you grounded, whole, secure. A chosen one does not look for someone to complete them. They look for someone to walk beside them. And let me say this clearly, so it settles in your spirit. You were never delayed because you were unworthy. You were delayed because your destiny required strength. Weak love could not sustain your calling. Shallow connection could not support your depth. God knew that if He gave you love before you were spiritually anchored, you might have chosen comfort over calling. That is why the waiting season was long. That is why the lessons were intense. That is why you had to walk alone when others were coupled. God was building something in you that required uninterrupted focus. You are not late, you are precise. When God assigns love to a chosen one, He does it with intention, alignment, and divine order. He does not rush sacred unions. He protects them. And before He releases your soulmate into your life, He makes sure you are no longer searching from a place of lack, but standing in a place of authority. So stop questioning the past. Stop replaying what didn't work. Stop wondering why others moved ahead while you stood still. You were not standing still. You were being positioned. And now, because you were set apart before love was assigned, when love finally arrives, it will not distract you from God. It will draw you closer to Him. And chosen ones, let me take this deeper so your heart can fully rest in this truth. God does not delay love to punish you. He delays it to protect what is sacred inside you. Your soul is not common. Your emotional depth is not common. Your spiritual sensitivity is not common. That is why casual love could never stay. It was never meant to. Every season of isolation was not emptiness, it was instruction. God was teaching you how to sit with yourself without running. He was teaching you how to hear His voice without needing validation from another human being. Many people enter relationships to escape themselves. You were forced to face yourself. That is not easy, but it is powerful. Think about this carefully. If God had allowed your soulmate to find you when you were still questioning your worth, still chasing approval, still tolerating disrespect, that union would have been built on insecurity. And insecurity always poisons love. God refused to let that be your story. So He removed distractions, He allowed distance, He closed doors that looked promising but carried hidden damage. He watched over your heart when you didn't even know how to protect it yourself. That is the love of a father who knows his child's capacity to feel deeply. You were learning boundaries even when you didn't realize it. You were learning discernment through disappointment. You were learning strength through solitude. And slowly, without you noticing, your standards rose. Your tolerance for nonsense disappeared. Your spirit matured. That is how God prepares chosen ones for divine love. Not through comfort, but through clarity. So when your soulmate finally finds you, they won't meet a broken version of you. They will meet someone rooted, aware, and spiritually awake. Someone who knows who they are and who God is in their life. And that is why the wait was necessary. You were not forgotten. You were being fortified. The hidden warfare against your union. Chosen ones, there is something you must understand clearly, without fear, but with awareness. Not every delay in your love life was emotional. Not every breakup was human. Not every missed connection was accidental. Some of what you experienced was spiritual resistance, and once you understand this, you will stop blaming yourself. Whenever God prepares a divine union, opposition follows. Why? Because a chosen one in alignment is powerful alone, but unstoppable in divine partnership. And the enemy knows this. That is why confusion showed up when clarity was close. That is why distractions appeared when alignment was near. That is why wrong people felt intense, magnetic, and familiar, but left you drained, anxious, and doubting yourself. Those were not random relationships. Those were counterfeits. Counterfeit connections are designed to feel almost right, almost safe, almost deep. They mirror just enough of what your soul desires to pull you in, but they lack the foundation to sustain you. And for chosen ones, counterfeits are especially dangerous because you love with intention. You don't play games. you don't attach lightly. So when you bonded with the wrong person, it cost you more than it would cost others. This is where God stepped in repeatedly. Some connections ended abruptly. Some people changed overnight. Some situations collapsed without warning. And you were left confused, replaying conversations, wondering what you did wrong. But hear me clearly now. God will end things suddenly when slow endings would destroy you. He will cut cords you are too loyal to release. He will remove people you keep giving chances to because he sees what you cannot. You weren't rejected, you were rescued. The enemy's strategy is subtle. It does not always attack directly. Sometimes it distracts, sometimes it delays. Sometimes it attaches you to someone who keeps you emotionally busy, but spiritually stagnant. Someone who takes your energy, your time, your prayers, your focus. And as long as you are emotionally entangled, you are not fully aligned. That is why those relationships felt exhausting. You were pouring into something that could never pour back into you at the same depth. Your spirit knew it, even when your heart tried to ignore it. That inner unrest you felt was discernment, not anxiety. Chosen ones often mistake spiritual warnings for emotional discomfort. But discomfort is often God's alarm system. There were moments when love almost worked. The timing felt close. The connection felt strong. But something always blocked the next step. Distance, miscommunication, sudden silence, unexplainable resistance. And you wondered why things could never flow naturally. Because divine unions flow. They do not drain. They do not confuse. They do not require you to shrink, chase, or beg. If you had been allowed to stay in those counterfeit connections longer, you would have slowly dimmed your light. And God will never allow his chosen to lose themselves for love. Some of you were protected from marriages that would have broken you. Some of you were protected from soul ties that would have taken years to heal. Some of you were protected from partners who admired your light but secretly competed with it. And yes, that protection sometimes felt like loss. But God always sees the end from the beginning. There is also something else you must acknowledge. The more anointing you carry, the more resistance you face. Your union is not just about romance. It is about purpose, about legacy, about impact. And anything tied to purpose is targeted. That is why your love life felt harder than others. Not because you were unlucky, but because you were marked. Spiritual warfare does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like repeated disappointment. Sometimes it looks like attraction to emotionally unavailable people. Sometimes it looks like waiting longer than feels fair. But behind the scenes, God was intercepting attacks you never saw. There were people who wanted access to your body, but not your soul. Your comfort, but not your calling. Your nurturing, but not your truth. And God blocked them, over and over again. You may not have understood it then, but every delay weakened the counterfeit and strengthened your discernment. Every failed connection refined your awareness. Every heartbreak trained you to listen to your spirit instead of your emotions. That is how chosen ones grow. Let me say this gently but firmly. If your soulmate had found you before this discernment was developed, you might have mistaken intensity for alignment. You might have ignored red flags in the name of chemistry. You might have compromised your standards just to keep someone. God refused to let that happen. So he allowed resistance until you were no longer easily deceived. Until your spirit became louder than your desire. Until peace mattered more than passion. That is when warfare loses its power over you. Now, many of you are in a different place. You are calmer, more selective, less reactive. You don't chase connections anymore. You observe them. You feel less urgency and more clarity. That is not because you gave up on love. It is because you healed. And when warfare can no longer manipulate you through emotion, it loses access. Understand this. The enemy delays to destroy. God delays to prepare. One drains you, the other strengthens you. And everything you went through was working in your favor, even when it didn't feel like it. Your union was protected because you were protected. And now, the resistance that once blocked your path has lost its authority over you. And chosen ones, There is one more layer you must recognize so that fear never enters your heart again. Spiritual warfare only has power where awareness is missing. And now you are aware. You are no longer emotionally impulsive. You are no longer easily pulled by words, promises, or surface-level affection. That growth alone tells me the season has shifted. Notice how you no longer feel the urge to force connections. Notice how silence no longer scares you the way it used to. That is because warfare trained you, but it no longer controls you. What once confused you now educates you. What once hurt you now protects you. The enemy's greatest failure was underestimating how much wisdom would come out of your pain. Instead of breaking you, it sharpened you. Instead of isolating you, it aligned you. And now, the very tactics that once delayed your union cannot work anymore. This is why peace has started to replace restlessness. This is why you feel a quiet certainty instead of desperation. You are no longer vulnerable to counterfeit love because you recognize the difference between intensity and truth. So do not fear delay anymore. Delay has done its work. The resistance you faced was not a sign to quit, but a sign of value. Precious things are always guarded, and now that you are guarded by wisdom instead of emotion, your union is no longer exposed. God was healing you before he connected you. Chosen ones, I want you to breathe for a moment and let this settle in your spirit. God was not withholding love from you. He was healing you. And there is a difference so deep that once you understand it, regret will no longer have power over you. Many of you entered past connections carrying wounds you did not cause. Rejection from childhood, abandonment that shaped your attachment, betrayals that taught you to stay silent instead of speak up. You were strong, yes, but you were still bleeding in places you had learned to hide. And God, in his wisdom, refused to connect you permanently while those wounds were still open. Love does not heal unhealed wounds, it exposes them. If God had allowed your soulmate to find you while you were still seeking validation, you would have leaned on them emotionally in ways that were never meant for a human being. That kind of pressure slowly suffocates even divine love. God did not want you to confuse companionship with healing. Healing comes first. So he slowed everything down. He placed you in seasons where you had no choice but to sit with yourself, seasons where distractions fell away, seasons where people disappeared, and yes, seasons where loneliness spoke louder than comfort. But those seasons were not empty. They were surgical. God was going deep, not quick. He was teaching you how to self-regulate your emotions instead of reacting from pain. He was showing you patterns you kept repeating without realizing it. Why you attracted emotionally unavailable people, why you overgave, why you tolerated inconsistency, why you stayed longer than you should have. These were not flaws, they were survival strategies you learned long ago, and God gently began to dismantle them. Healing is uncomfortable because it removes familiarity. At first it felt like everything was being stripped away. People you leaned on, roles you identified with, versions of yourself you thought were strong but were actually just coping. And in that stripping, you felt exposed, vulnerable, unsure. But that exposure was necessary. God does not build on cracked foundations. You were learning to stand emotionally on your own feet. Chosen ones often carry others before they learn to carry themselves. You are compassionate, empathic. You sense pain quickly and respond without being asked. But that same gift can turn into self-neglect if boundaries are not healed. God had to teach you that love does not mean self-sacrifice to the point of depletion. So he taught you to say no. He taught you to walk away. He taught you to sit in silence without explaining yourself. And each time you chose peace over proving, a wound closed. Some of you had to unlearn the belief that love must hurt to be real. Others had to unlearn the idea that consistency is boring. Some had to let go of chaos disguised as passion. God was rewiring your nervous system so that peace would finally feel safe. That takes time. Healing is not loud. It does not announce itself. One day you just realize you are no longer triggered by what once controlled you. One day you stop replaying old conversations. One day you stop waiting for apologies that will never come. One day you feel calm where there used to be anxiety. That is healing, and that is when God prepares connection. Because healed people love differently. They don't cling, they don't test, they don't chase. They choose, they observe, they respond instead of react. And that emotional stability is not optional for divine unions. It is required. God also healed your perception. Before, you saw people through potential, through hope, through imagination. Now you see them through patterns, actions, and consistency. That shift alone saved you from repeating cycles. Let me say something important here. God did not isolate you because you were broken. He isolated you because you were valuable. You needed space to heal without being influenced, rushed, or distracted. And isolation, when guided by God, is not punishment. It is restoration. During that time, your relationship with God deepened. You stopped talking to Him only when things went wrong. You started listening, trusting, surrendering, and slowly, your identity shifted. You stopped seeing yourself as someone waiting to be chosen. You started seeing yourself as someone already chosen. That inner shift changes everything. When you no longer need love to feel worthy, you are ready to receive love without losing yourself. When you are no longer afraid of being alone, you stop tolerating what disturbs your peace. When you are no longer operating from wounds, you stop attracting wounded partners. That is why the connection could not happen before. It was not about timing on a calendar. It was about alignment in your soul. God heals in layers. First awareness, then discomfort, then release, then peace. And only after peace does He introduce permanence. Because peace is the environment where divine love thrives. Some of you wondered why God kept removing people right when you were getting attached. It was because attachment was forming around unhealed pain, not truth. God loves you too much to let that define your future, so He healed you quietly, patiently, thoroughly. And now you are not looking for someone to save you. You are looking for someone who can walk beside you. You are not seeking completion, you are offering partnership. That is the posture of someone ready for divine union. Healing came first because love deserves wholeness. And now that healing has done its work, connection no longer threatens you. It complements you. That is why the waiting season mattered. And chosen ones, let me anchor this truth even deeper into your spirit so you never doubt God's wisdom again. Healing is not something God rushes, especially when the heart involved is yours. He knew exactly how deeply you feel, how intensely you attach, and how loyal you become once you open your heart. That is why He took His time with you. Some of you had to grieve versions of yourselves you outgrew. Others had to grieve people who were never meant to stay. And that grief was holy. It made room. It cleared emotional clutter. It taught you what you will never accept again. Healing is not about forgetting the past. It is about no longer bleeding from it. Notice how your prayers have changed. You no longer beg God to send someone. You ask Him to align you. You no longer pray from fear. You pray from trust. That shift did not happen overnight. It came from nights where you cried, questioned, and still chose faith. God also healed your patience, not the passive kind, but the confident kind. The kind that knows waiting is not wasted, the kind that rests without rushing. That kind of patience only comes from someone who has learned that God never arrives late. And here is the deepest part. God healed your capacity to receive love. Many people can give love but struggle to receive it without suspicion, fear, or self-sabotage. You had to learn that healthy love does not come with anxiety. It comes with peace. So when your soulmate arrives, you will not be afraid of consistency. You will not doubt kindness. You will not search for problems where there are none. You will recognize love because you are finally healed enough to hold it. That healing was worth the wait. Your soulmate was also being prepared. Chosen ones, I want you to release one quiet fear that has followed you for a long time. The fear that maybe you were growing alone. The fear that while you were healing, waiting, and surrendering, your soulmate was somewhere else moving on without you. That fear is not truth. It never was. God does not prepare one soul for divine union. He prepares two. While you were in your silent seasons, your soulmate was also in theirs. While you were shedding old patterns, they were being stripped of theirs. While you were learning discernment, they were learning humility. While you were learning patience, they were learning responsibility. God works in parallel, even when you cannot see it. Divine timing is not about coincidence. It is about synchronization. Your soulmate could not find you before because they were not yet capable of holding you. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not mentally. And you, at that time, were not yet ready to recognize them either. God never connects souls based on desire alone. He connects them based on readiness. Some of you would not have trusted the version of your soulmate that existed years ago. Others would have tried to save them instead of walking beside them. Some would have met them through trauma instead of truth. And God refused to let your love story begin in imbalance. So he waited. He allowed both of you to go through lessons that could not be skipped, pain that could not be borrowed, growth that had to be personal. Your soulmate had to learn how to stand on their own, just like you did. Because divine unions are not built on dependence, they are built on mutual strength. You must understand this. A soulmate is not someone who completes you, they are someone who complements you. And that requires both souls to be whole enough to stand without leaning. If one is healed and the other is still bleeding, love becomes caretaking. And caretaking is not partnership. God protected you from that imbalance. Some of you wondered why you felt ready long before anyone showed up. It is because God was waiting for alignment, not impatience. You were being shaped first because you carry awareness. Your soulmate needed time to develop theirs, and that difference does not mean one is better than the other. It means God knows the order required. Think of how many relationships fail because one person outgrows the other. God prevented that by making sure growth happened before connection, not after. So when you finally meet, there will be recognition without confusion, depth without fear, peace without effort. Your soulmate was also learning boundaries. They were learning what love is not. They were unlearning toxic cycles. They were facing parts of themselves they avoided for years. And just like you, they probably felt alone without understanding why. Chosen ones often forget this part. They assume waiting means absence, but waiting is work. God does not waste seasons. Every delay carried instruction for both of you. Some of you were being prepared to lead. Others were being prepared to support. Some were being refined in faith, others in discipline. But all of it was necessary. God builds divine unions with intention, not emotion. And here is something powerful you need to hear. The longer the preparation, the stronger the foundation. God does not rush what must last. Quick connections often collapse. Divine connections endure. Your soulmate could not find you until both of you could meet without masks, until neither of you needed to pretend, until neither of you needed saving, until love could flow freely without fear of abandonment, control, or loss. That is when God releases union. Now, many of you feel a shift, a calm expectancy, not anxiety, not urgency, just a quiet knowing. That is alignment approaching. That is the season changing. That is preparation meeting readiness. Your soulmate is not late. They are aligned. God is not testing your patience. He is protecting your future. And when the meeting happens, it will not feel chaotic. It will feel familiar. Not because you knew them before, but because your spirit will recognize safety, clarity, peace. That recognition only comes when both souls are prepared. So trust this season. Trust the process. Trust the God who has been working on both ends all along. Your paths were never disconnected. They were simply being aligned. Why you couldn't recognize them before? Chosen ones, this part requires honesty with yourself, not judgment. You could not recognize your soulmate before because you were seeing through wounds, not wisdom. And that is not shameful. It is human. God never expected you to see clearly while you were still healing. Before awakening, your emotional lens was shaped by survival. You were drawn to what felt familiar, not what was healthy. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. That is why calm once felt boring, consistency once felt suspicious, and stability once felt like something you didn't deserve. You didn't lack discernment, it was simply undeveloped. In earlier seasons, you recognized people through chemistry instead of character, through words instead of patterns, through potential instead of reality. That is how unhealed hearts operate. They imagine what love could be instead of observing what it actually is. And God, in His mercy, did not allow recognition until imagination stopped leading you. There were moments when your soulmate may have crossed your path energetically, but you were not tuned to the same frequency yet. You were still attracting lessons, not legacy, growth, not permanence. And God will never allow a divine connection to be misinterpreted or mishandled. Some of you met people who looked right, but felt wrong. Others met people who felt intense but destabilizing. That intensity confused you. You thought love should be overwhelming, consuming, dramatic. But that was trauma speaking, not truth. Divine love is steady. Trauma bonds are loud. At one time, you couldn't tell the difference. God also withheld recognition because recognition creates attachment, and attachment without readiness creates pain. If you had recognized your soulmate too early, fear would have spoken louder than faith. You would have questioned their intentions, tested their consistency, sabotaged peace because chaos felt normal. So God waited. He waited until you learned how to regulate your emotions, until you stopped projecting past wounds onto present people, until you stopped expecting abandonment before it happened, until you trusted calm more than adrenaline. Recognition is spiritual clarity, and clarity comes after healing. There is also something important you must understand. Recognition is mutual. It is not one-sided awareness. If you had recognized them before they were ready, you would have felt unseen, unchosen, misaligned. That would have wounded you again. God protected you from loving someone who could not yet love you back at the same level. So even if paths crossed, access was blocked. You may look back now and realize that if certain relationships had worked, you would have stayed small. You would have compromised truth for connection. You would have silenced yourself to keep peace. That version of you could not recognize divine partnership, because divine partnership does not require shrinking. God had to grow your voice before He revealed your counterpart. Recognition also requires self-recognition. You had to know who you were first, your values, your boundaries, your non-negotiables, your spiritual standards. Without that self-clarity, you would have recognized the wrong person as the one, simply because they showed interest. Now, interest alone is no longer enough. Notice how your attraction has changed. You are no longer pulled by charm alone. You observe consistency, you notice effort, you sense intention, you feel energy. That awareness did not exist before. That is why recognition had to wait. God did not hide your soulmate from you. He hid you from confusion, and let me free you from regret right here. You did not miss them. You were not blind. You were protected. Divine things are never missed. They arrive when both eyes and spirit are open. Now, recognition will feel different. It will not rush you. It will not confuse you. It will not trigger your insecurities. It will feel calm, respectful, and grounded. You will not question whether you are enough. You will feel seen without performing. That is how you will know. You couldn't recognize them before because you were becoming someone who could. And now you are. And chosen ones, let me seal this understanding so regret never revisits your heart. You were not late to recognition. Recognition waits for readiness. God does not reveal sacred connections to unprepared hearts because clarity without stability creates fear, not love. Earlier, your spirit was learning through contrast. You had to experience what love is not before you could recognize what it truly is. Without those lessons, peace would have felt unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things often get rejected. God knew that if He brought your soulmate too early, you might have walked past them searching for intensity instead of truth. You also needed to learn how to trust yourself. Before, you second-guessed your intuition. You ignored inner warnings to keep connection. You explained away red flags to avoid being alone. That version of you would have struggled to trust divine guidance. Recognition requires confidence in your inner voice. God strengthened that voice through disappointment. Now you pause before reacting. You listen before attaching. You observe before committing. That shift alone tells me you are no longer operating from fear. You are operating from awareness. And here is something deeply important. Recognition does not come with anxiety. It comes with familiarity without history. It feels natural, not forced. There is no rush to impress, no urge to prove, no fear of loss. That is how you will know the difference this time. Earlier, you were trying to earn love. Now you allow love to meet you where you are. That change could only come from growth. God also protected your soulmate from being misread by an unhealed version of you. You might have doubted their intentions, tested their consistency, or pulled away out of fear. God refused to let that happen. He wanted your first experience of true recognition to be peaceful, not painful. So release the thought that you missed something. You did not. What is divinely assigned cannot be bypassed, delayed by mistake, or lost through ignorance. It is preserved by God Himself. Now that your eyes are clear and your heart is steady, recognition will not be dramatic. It will be obvious, and it will feel safe. That is how divine timing works. Signs you are now ready for divine union. Chosen ones, this is where everything begins to make sense. Readiness does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with peace. And if you pay attention to your inner world right now, you will notice that you are no longer who you were in the waiting seasons. Something has shifted, quietly, deeply. One of the clearest signs you are ready is this. You no longer feel desperate for love. You still desire connection, but it no longer controls you. You are not checking the clock. You are not asking God every day when. You are not comparing your timeline to others. That urgency has softened. And that is not because you gave up. It is because you are grounded. Desperation repels alignment. Peace attracts it. Another sign is how you respond to being alone. There was a time when solitude felt heavy, almost unbearable. Now, it feels neutral, sometimes even comforting. You no longer see alone as abandoned. You see it as quiet, as space, as safety. That tells me you are no longer using relationships to escape yourself. You have also become selective without being closed. That is important. You are open to love, but you are no longer open to everything. Your standards are clearer. Your boundaries are firmer. You do not feel guilty for saying no. You do not over-explain your needs. You trust that what is aligned will not require you to shrink or beg. Chosen ones who are not ready still negotiate their boundaries. Ready ones enforce them calmly. Notice how your emotional reactions have changed. You do not spiral the way you used to. Silence does not immediately trigger fear. Delayed responses do not send you into overthinking. You no longer assume abandonment as the default outcome. That emotional regulation is not accidental. It is the result of healing. You are also less impressed by words. Promises no longer move you. You observe actions. You notice consistency. You feel energy. That discernment is a sign of readiness. It means you are no longer bonding through fantasy. You are bonding through reality. There is another shift many of you are experiencing. You feel more connected to God than ever before, not out of fear, but out of trust. Your prayers are calmer. You listen more than you speak. You surrender outcomes instead of trying to control them. Divine unions are built on shared surrender, not shared anxiety. God will not introduce someone into your life who replaces Him. He introduces someone who walks with him. You may also notice that you are no longer chasing potential. You are drawn to presence, to availability, to emotional safety. That is a major sign. It means your nervous system has healed enough to accept peace without suspicion. Earlier, chaos felt exciting. Now, it feels exhausting. You are also no longer trying to prove your worth. You do not perform to be chosen. You show up as you are and allow alignment to respond. That confidence is quiet, not loud, and it is deeply attractive in the spiritual realm. Some of you feel this strange, calm expectancy, not impatience, not anticipation fueled by anxiety, just a sense that something is aligning. That is not imagination. That is intuition. When divine timing approaches, the soul settles. It does not panic. Another sign is that you are comfortable walking away from what does not align, even if it means being alone longer. That tells me you value peace over proximity, and peace is the currency of divine unions. You also no longer romanticize struggle. You understand that love does not need to hurt to be real. You are not looking for someone to fix or save. You are looking for someone who is responsible for their own healing. That mindset is essential. Divine partnerships are not rescue missions. Notice how your conversations have changed. You speak more honestly. You express needs without fear. You ask direct questions. You no longer hide parts of yourself to be accepted. That authenticity creates the environment where true connection can thrive. You are also more patient, but not passive. You trust God's timing, but you do not tolerate disrespect. That balance is maturity. It means you are no longer confusing patience with self-abandonment. Let me say something important here. Readiness does not mean perfection. You are not healed of everything. You are simply healed enough to not bleed on what is sacred. That is all God requires. You are ready because you can receive love without suspicion. You are ready because you can give love without losing yourself. You are ready because you can stand alone without fear. And you are ready because you no longer chase what runs from you. This is the season where God no longer needs to protect you from love. You have learned how to protect your peace. And when that happens, divine union is no longer dangerous. It is safe. So if you are noticing these signs in yourself, do not rush, do not doubt, do not question. Simply stay aligned, stay honest, stay surrendered. Because readiness is not about arrival, it is about posture. And your posture now is one of trust. That is when God moves. And chosen ones, let me expand this gently, because readiness is something the mind often questions, even when the soul already knows. Sometimes you don't feel ready because you still remember the pain. But readiness is not the absence of memory. It is the absence of fear controlling your decisions. Notice how you no longer chase closure. You no longer need explanations from people who disappeared. You no longer replay conversations to understand what went wrong. That tells me you trust God's removal more than human reasoning. That level of trust only comes when the heart has healed enough to let go. You're also no longer trying to rush God through comparison. Other people's engagements, marriages, or relationships no longer trigger insecurity the way they once did. You can genuinely be happy for others without feeling behind. That emotional neutrality is powerful. It means you are secure in your own timeline. Another sign is how you handle disappointment now. When something doesn't work out, you don't collapse. You don't internalize it as rejection. You don't assume it means you are unlovable. You pause, reflect, and move forward with dignity. That resilience is readiness. You have also become honest with yourself about what you want. Not what sounds spiritual, not what looks good on paper, but what your soul truly needs. You no longer settle for half availability, mixed signals, or emotional inconsistency. And you don't feel guilty for that anymore. That clarity is a direct result of healing. Pay attention to this as well. You are no longer afraid of deep connection. Before, part of you wanted love, and part of you feared it. Now, that inner conflict has quieted. You trust yourself to choose wisely. You trust God to guide you. And that trust removes fear. You may still have moments of loneliness, but loneliness no longer defines you. It passes without consuming you. You don't spiral, you don't panic, you don't make impulsive decisions just to fill space. That self-control is spiritual maturity. There is also a new kind of confidence forming in you. Not arrogance, not pride, just a calm knowing of who you are and what you bring into a relationship. You no longer feel like you have to convince someone of your value. You expect to be met with the same effort you give. That expectation is healthy. God does not bring divine unions to people who still doubt their worth. He brings them to people who can stand in truth without shrinking. And that is where you are now. You are also more comfortable with uncertainty. You don't need every detail revealed. You trust that God will show you what you need to know when you need to know it. That surrender removes pressure from love and places it back in God's hands where it belongs. Let me say this clearly. Readiness does not announce itself loudly. It shows up as calm, as patience, as self-respect, as peace. And peace is the clearest confirmation. If you are experiencing this inner stability, then you are not preparing anymore. You are positioned to recognize without fear, to receive without suspicion, to love without losing yourself. So stay where you are, stay grounded, stay aligned. Because when God moves in this season, it will not feel rushed. It will feel right. Conclusion. Trust. The timing, your union is near. Chosen ones, let me leave you with this truth so your heart can finally rest. You were never late, you were never forgotten, and you were never overlooked by God. Every delay you experienced was intentional, protective, and guided by divine wisdom. God did not keep love from you. He kept you for love. What you went through was not wasted time. It was sacred preparation. It shaped your discernment. It strengthened your spirit. It healed your heart. And now, you stand in a place where love will no longer confuse you, drain you, or cost you your peace. That alone tells me the season has changed. God does not deny chosen ones. He delays until alignment replaces urgency. And now, you are aligned. Not desperate, not searching, just open, grounded, and trusting. That is the posture where divine unions are released. Your soulmate will not arrive to fix you. They will arrive to walk with you. They will recognize your peace because they carry their own. There will be no games, no chasing, no fear of loss. Just clarity, mutual respect, and spiritual safety. So stop questioning the past. Stop replaying what didn't work. Stop wondering if something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You are being prepared for something real. Trust God's timing. Trust the process. Trust the version of yourself you have become. Before we close, chosen ones, if this message spoke to your spirit, give this video a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tap the bell icon so you stay connected to these divine messages, and share this with other chosen ones who need this peace. And comment 444 in the comments as a declaration that you are protected, grounded, and ready for what God is bringing into your life. Rest now. God is working.